my kids to go through life this way. I want them to stand up and say, here I am, you know, and be an American, be part of society, this so-called great society.
I think you can just see it by being around the people that the civil rights movement is just really starting and really growing now, you know, as far as the Mexican American is concerned.
Mexican Americans are the second largest ethnic minority in the United States. There are 5 million of them, 90% of whom live in the 5 southwestern states of California, Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. Some, like the Hispano land heirs of New Mexico, had been living there for hundreds of years, scores of years before the landing of the Mayflower. Others joined the steady stream of migrants across the Rio Grande from Mexico every day. The group is the youngest and fastest growing ethnic population in the nation. Traditionally, Mexican Americans have been agricultural workers, campesinos, for the most part, a gentle, lovable people. There was little need to change their language and culture, but recently the impact of technology and a changing economy has subjected the community to massive political and social dislocation. Within a relatively short period, thousands have trekked to the cities, bringing with them all the disadvantages of a traditionally rural people: lack of education, a foreign language. The Black Revolution, with its high drama, both inspired and somewhat obscured the more localized protests of Mexican American groups. They are now demanding the rights of citizenship and full participation in the economic, political, and social life of this country. Regardless of the disparity of issues they are faced with or their style of protest, all emerging leaders speak of La Raza, or the race, an almost mystical nationalistic concept that unites all Spanish-speaking people, whether they be called Latinos or Hispanos or Mexicanos. New leaders are emerging from the barrios or ghettos. Rudolfo Corky Gonazles, founder of the Crusade for Justice in Denver, organized a cultural center, which is now a base for community control.
And I ask the Americans here that I'm going to read, whether you like it or not.
Reyes Lopez Tejarina, a fiery ex-evangelist, is head of the Federal Alliance of Free City States, whose members electrified New Mexico by a daring raid on a county courthouse.
From Delano, the word will go forth all over the country. It'll go to all parts of California.
And Cesar Chavez, with his farm labor movement, is strongest in terms of numbers and national influence, started his battle against California growers 3 years ago.
What we care is that they're farm workers, and our job is to organize them, and we'll never stop. Our job will not be done until every farm worker is organized.
¡Que vivan los sectores por la justicia! ¡Que viva!
In the largest cities under the banner of La Raza Unida, they picket and boycott and march to make their voices heard. Dr. Ernesto Galarza is a Mexican-American scholar, author, and lecturer.
The Mexican people who have come to this country have been the very poorest of the poor of Mexico. And in these 50 years, they have had no choice but to work in the lowest income brackets of the economy. They've been on the low spot of the totem pole economically and socially during these 50 years. These have been poor people from the very beginning, and they still are. There is very little capital formation in the Mexican community. They don't own industries. They have practically no stake in the economy. They don't live off capital. They live by, still, as they always have, traditionally, by the sweat of their brow and by their brain power and by their daily toil. This is the kind of a population it is.
A report by the U.S. Commission of Civil Rights states that more than 1/3 of all Mexican-American families living in the Southwest live in official poverty. That is, on incomes of less than $3,000 a year. A Mexican-American is 7 times more likely than an Anglo or white to live in a substandard house. The chance that his baby will be born dead are twice as great. The unemployment rate is 2 times that of Anglos, and of those employed, the vast majority, almost 80%, work at unskilled, low-paying jobs. The cycle of poverty usually begins in the rural areas, such as this one in South Texas. Most of the counties here have a 40 to 60% Spanish-speaking population. 40% or more are considered functionally illiterate, and many live in the apathy and despair bred by poverty.
Sometimes we eat twice a day, sometimes we eat once a day. Tortilla with beans, potatoes. I never drink milk.
Never? Do you have water?
Yeah.
Running water?
Yeah.
The children have enough clothes?
No.
Your daughter's husband? Is he working?
No. They don't have no work. We feel it them? What you all want to do, want Mama to do. That's what she said. Huh?
You ever been to the community council office?
Yes, but they never give us some. I haven't. That's what my mother said.
Have they never helped you any?
How old are you?
19. Be 20.
How long have you been married?
Who?
You.
Yeah, well. Okay.
Huh?
A month.
A month? You like being married?
I don't like nobody asks me that questions. Sorry about that.
I only want to know.
I know you wanted to know, but I don't like nobody asking me. I don't know.
By tradition, the Mexican Americans have always had large families. This used to be a beautiful situation, say 20, 30 years ago, where agriculture was really the prime factor of employment at the time. The larger the family you had, the more money you made. The entire family would go work, say for instance, 3-4 months of the year, make enough money to where they could coast the remaining 9 months of the year. But today, in today's complicated world with automation and so forth and that, it's impossible for families to have this size of a family. We have 44.5 of all our people in the county who live in poverty in B County. This was a survey taken in the 65 and 66. And this amounted to approximately 10,287 people of our county, which is composed of 25,000 people who are in poverty. 79% of all the poverty in Lee County lies on the Mexican Americans.
What does this mean in terms of, lifestyles and things like that?
Well, it means, first of all, many of them, I think, are deprived of the basic necessities of life. And certainly they are deprived of most of the luxuries of the modern living. Many of our children are starting school, and they do not know any English, so they are held behind in this regard. And once you fall behind in your education, it's very hard to catch up in it. And secondly, it's an unawareness of life as it really is. They are limited sometimes to just this little district. Some of our boys and girls have never been outside of the town of Beeville. Have never been as far as Corpus Christi, which is only 60 miles away. They don't know what a park is or what a lake is. They don't know what it means to go boating or fishing, things like this. And of course, in anybody's life, this is a handicap.
All right, now let's go over the words. All right, I want pronunciation, pronunciation.
The people we're talking about now had a devil of a time getting any type of education, and I'll give you a figure on that. The average education for a male or for an adult Mexican American, 25 years or better. The average education is 2.1 years of school in this area.
Their mother with the...
In the past, it was just generally assumed by the Anglo community that the Mexicans don't need to go to school because why the hell do you have to go to school to pick onions? Any education was actually actively discouraged in rural school systems.
Help clean the house.
All right, very, very good. All right, Mrs. Rankin, brief.
We have no formal Spanish in our elementary schools here. We have been doing some thinking about it and researching, trying to discover new and better ways. We know that possibly the way that we are doing is not the best. We have what we call a beginner program for them, and it's more of an oral English program to teach them to speak the English language. And of course, this is a handicap for the children concerned because they must know the English language in order to do their regular first grade work. So normally this detains them a year in school.
Dr. Galarza points out that there has been a revolutionary change in the Mexican-American population. Functional illiteracy inherited from generations of miseducation in the rural areas has become the major focus of Mexican-American protest in the urban areas. Yet the stereotype of the Mexican as a wetback, stoop laborer persists.
We can no longer talk about the Mexican campesino as the typical Mexican in the state. He's vanishing. I would guess that the 1970 census will show, if not better, at least a 90% concentration of persons of Spanish surname and of Mexican ancestry living in the cities. The displacement of the rural Mexican and the migration to the cities means that in the last 15 years, the large cities in the Southwest like San Antonio, Phoenix, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Fresno, and others have developed a very, very large population of Mexican Americans. These are refugees. They're not refugees from Mexico, they're refugees from displacement and from economic exploitation in the rural areas. And they've come to the cities to look for work. What's happening to the Mexicans psychologically is that having been relegated, having been cut out from a decent education and from participation in the economy and from consideration as human beings, they are now groping for an ideology that will first of all make them feel important, make them feel dignified, make them feel worthy.
The search for an ideology coincides with a search by youthful Mexican-American individuals for an identity in the spectrum of American protest. Rudolfo Corky Gonazles, an ex-boxer turned civil rights activist in Denver, Colorado, answers that need by digging deep into the past. Last year he founded El Santo de la Cruzada, a self-help community base dedicated to a cultural renaissance for the Mexican-American.
This is our symbol. It's an Indian mother, a Spanish father, and a cat with a mustache facing it. On one side of us, we predate Plymouth Rock 20,000 years. On the other side, 300. Yet we're told to identify with what's coming from the eastern seaboard. But again, you say, well, that's past. It has nothing to do with us today. Well, it has a lot to do with us today. It has a lot to do with us, with the culture that our people have had is going to the graves with our old people. So that we have to start relating to who and what we are. Not alienation, it's movement, self-determination. The Japanese, they have no political power, so to speak, because they're small numbers, yet they have economic control of their life, and what they develop, it goes into the majority society, but the money comes back into rich new blood for themselves to develop their own people. You know, this is because they control their church, they control their social life, and their whole living together. And I don't hear anybody saying the Japanese are alienated, but the minute a few black people get together, they say, man, those guys are bad. When Mexicans start to get together, they say, well, gee, they might think I'm a bad guy. You know, the hell with what they think. Because what they thought has created all the problems for the mass of our people. There wouldn't be any racism if his folks and his forefathers hadn't provoked it. There wouldn't be any discrimination if his forefathers hadn't provoked it and built upon it and created a status quo barrier to all other people. As we watch the black move, as we watch the radical Anglo move, and we say, you know, where are we going? We've got it all right here. We don't have to go. We just have to preserve it and build it up. We have to defend it. We have to take care of these things that are important to our people. It's right here. It's right here in my hand. My feet are on the ground, and this is who I am, and I'm proud of it.
We started the Crusade for Justice about 3 years ago. Started off as a movement on different issues that took place in this city, police brutality, other issues. And we started teaching the basic philosophy of where we're going to go. And we created a tight unit of people, a family unit, you might say. Not all family, but this is what we become. We set a base, and we're strong. It's very much like revolution in an underdeveloped country. 50 people can start a revolution. So that we have developed people from any ages from 10, 11 up to 64. And they'll sit to, some guys are dropouts, some people are college students. Housewives that can relate to what we're talking about and sit through 3-4 hours of this meeting. Of course, they also then interrelate and discuss something that they won't do or wouldn't do at school or wouldn't do in the society because there's nothing there for them to identify with.
Conocemos el abecedario, ahora vamos con el abecedario. Rápido, ¿eh? A, B, C, D,
Here they're learning about themselves. They're learning about the heroes that they can identify with. They're learning the fact that there are people like José Martí with his versos sencillos, and the fact that there is a Gabriela Mistral who writes interesting short stories, and not only Louisa May Alcott. The girls, this is a great interest to know that there are women with their names that are now contemporary successes, let's say, in South America. We're right next door to our culture. You know, it isn't like having to go back overseas or sailing the Pacific or the Atlantic to visit the people that you come from or that you stem from. The people that we stem from, whether they're blood relatives or even vaguely related to us, are there. They have our name. They have our culture. And there's a continual flow. If it isn't through legal means, it's definitely through illegal means. I don't have a number or anything, but I know darn good and well that there are constant Mexicans being brought across illegally to work in the fields and other things. So then after they've served their purpose, then they join the society that we're living in right now.
And here,
the kid that walks through these doors, this building's his. He knows it. He doesn't come to a director at some center to say yes sir and no sir, and to feel obligated or beholding for what's going to be given to him or a service. It's part of him. It's his, and he knows it.
Like Corky says, we didn't get any government funds, we didn't get any foundation money, we didn't get any angel money. This was money from our own people. People like Julia, myself, Steve, John, and many crusaders who are dedicated for a better way for our people. I think this is the most important thing in our life, to be able to have pride in what we are. We have this, but we have to instill this within our own people.
Now the kids are learning different. They don't have to take abuse from anybody. They're as equal as anybody else in this God's country. Our kids are just as smart as anybody else's kids given the opportunities. And we wouldn't be fighting so hard if our parents before us would have done what we're doing for our children. But they always told us this is the way they are, this is the way we have to accept it. When I would come home and tell my dad, I was brought up in Brighton, went to school there, they were very prejudiced against Spanish and Mexicans. And I'd come home and tell my parents, and they say, well, this is the way it is, you have to accept it. We found out we don't have to accept it. And our kids are not going to. We're not going to settle for this for our kids. We're going to work with them and teach them our new way of life, which is our right. We have just as much right here as anybody else in this country, or more, because we funded it.
There's a vast ignorance about the Mexican, and consequently there's a myth that the Mexican is pliable, he is non-resistant, and that anybody can do anything to him that anybody wishes. Well, this isn't true. But now that he's become an urban Mexican, and now that there's a more numerous generation of Mexicans who have gone to school, many who have even gone through college, who are observing what's happening to the urban community, the tensions within the Mexican community are increasing, and they show themselves in the current protest movements. These are reflected in the student protests. They are reflected in the discontent with educational conditions, the school systems, and they're going to make themselves manifest in more ways than even these.
Last year, the parents of East Los Angeles, where some 700,000 Mexican Americans live, stormed the local school board for 4 consecutive days, picketed, slept in nights, protesting the demotion of a young Mexican American high school teacher who had been accused of organizing a strike. The issue was more of a culmination point because the parents had long been complaining about the school system's lack of interest in Mexican culture and history. This, they believed, was the basis of the dropout problem. 2 predominantly Mexican-American high schools in East Los Angeles registered dropout rates of as high as 53%, with very few of the students going on to college.
It's not so much, Mr. Castro. It's the issue, what a man means to every teacher. Academic freedom, shall we call it, to a Negro, to a Mexican, to an Anglo, shall we say. You are here deciding for all these teachers.
Last March, in a meeting attended by about 1,000 people at Lincoln High School, the thought was expressed that the time had come for a new dialogue to exist between the educational system and the Mexican community. I believe that the evidence before you points to the fact that this dialogue has begun. We have produced a new crop of orators. But more than that, we are here to express to you that in accepting a Mexican teacher who says that it's good to be Mexican, you're also accepting a principle that may govern our city without barbed wire in the middle of the street. For out of one flesh has God made all men.
Roll call, please. Mr. Gardner? Yes. Dr. Hardy?
Yes.
Dr. Nala? Yes. Dr. Roots? Yes. Dr. Wood?
No.
Reverend Jones? Yes. I move to adjourn.
Millions of dollars into East LA because that's what it's going to cost. Bilingual education, bicultural education, teacher training, changing curriculum. That's going to cost millions of dollars.
Tell us, when are you going back now? What are your plans?
It's up to the folks here when I go back.
California has the largest concentration of Mexican Americans, an estimated 1.7 million, consisting of about 420,000 families. 80% are native-born Americans. Of these, 350,000 families live on an average income of less than $2,000 per year. Average education is about 8 years of schooling, 4 years less than Anglos, 2 years less than blacks. The vicious cycle begins all over again. Cesar Chavez set out 3 years ago to win for California's vineyard workers privileges and rights that working men elsewhere had been enjoying for 30 years or more now. Elementary democracy, collective bargaining and union recognition, a fair wage and decent working conditions. California farm labor makes $4 billion with the help of an estimated 300 to 350,000 Mexican-American agricultural workers. With the help of a powerful lobby in Congress, illegal alien scab labor from Mexico, and a curious exemption from the National Labor Relations Act, most growers have held out against concessions. Today, the strikers have changed tactics. Last October, they launched a nationwide boycott of table grapes in cities across the nation, bringing their plea directly to the marketplaces of this country, where scab labor, economic intimidation, and the power of the growers' lobbies are neutralized by the conscience of the majority.
We've been forced into the boycott because of the fact that when you strike California agriculture, if you're taking on the entire structure, in this area we have to take on the courts and the police. Almost every political subdivision is against us, so we got to take them on with the employers, because the employers really by and large still at this point owe
But Cesar Chavez has remained determined.
The mere fact that we're still fighting them and they haven't been able to destroy us is a victory in itself, plus the fact that we've been able to get contracts, plus the fact that we've moved the growers an awful lot. We moved them from the beginning when they condemned us and they claimed that there was no strike, to a point where they had to admit that a strike was in progress, to a point where they now are toying around with the idea of legislation, things that were unheard of 3 years ago. So that's quite a lot of progress.
The growers forcing us to do. We are glad they give us a chance to have an election.
and let us decide if we really want the union or not. Because I keep saying a lot of times, you know, we ask you for one chance. We don't ask you for $1.40 or $2, $3 an hour. We don't want nothing like that. We don't need any favor at all. What we need to do is a piece of paper and let us to say we want union. We don't want union. And that's why we're trying to show our kids. You see in this bus is a lot of small people, the children, they come here with a purpose, they learn. Because I know our fight is going to be very, very long because the girls, they have the money, they have the lobbyists and everything else. So even if we don't get nothing, our kids is going to keep fighting. That is the main deal, to show our families to fight and to stand up for the rights, they saying that when they're small.
Don't fight Jeffrey! Don't fight Jeffrey! Don't fight Jeffrey!
Nos hemos traicionado. Cuando le damos la espalda a un grupo de mexicanos, bueno, ándale, entonces cambia su cheque y luego se regresa, ¿ok? Gracias, señora. I want to go in here and do some shopping. I should you when you were here shopping.
Even if we were to be jailed or be brutally suppressed, the book would go on.
There is shaping up in this country a coalition of backlashers. Backlash against the Negro, backlash against the low-income man, backlash against these legitimate protests against the exploitation, the Mexican, the Negro, the Filipino, the Indian, and so on. If these backlashes coalesce in one large national reaction, there are some dreary days ahead for the Mexican-American community and its organizations. But they'll survive. And as I look into the next 4 years, I have no misgivings as to the ability, the capacity, the durability of the Mexican. He's a durable man. When he speaks of himself as La Raza, he's not speaking of race. He's speaking of enduring spirit. And that's what he's got.
They gather in their taverns and sing songs that nourish their culture. A traditional pride makes them resist the assimilationist impulse, makes them refuse to tear the language from their tongues. My land is lost, writes a young poet. My culture has been raped. I limp from the lines at the welfare door. I shed a tear as I watch my children disappear behind a shroud of mediocrity, never to look back to remember me. The music of my people stirs a revolution, the poet sings. Whatever I call myself, Mexicano, Latino, Chicano, whatever I call myself, I look the same, I feel the same, I cry and sing the same.
Esa paloma no es otra cosa más que su alma. Que tú ya vienes a querer ser la desdicha. ¿qué van a saber de amores? No le llores.